researchers, policymakers, and civil society groups on topics relating to Africa. It brings together seasoned and emerging scholars, practitioners from all parts of the world in dialogue on contemporary challenges prevailing on the continent, with the aim of devising better pathways through which these challenges can be mitigated or avoided. So today we are focusing on the importance of dam removals, and we have invited an expert on dam removal who has been working on this in this field for over a decade. So her name is Pao Fernandez Garrido, and she's a forest engineer specialized in fishways design and river barrier removal. She was the coordinator of the inventories database compilation for the Amber Atlas and was one of the developers of the Dam Removal Europe initiative. She has been 10 years collecting dam removal case studies around Europe and USA to show the benefits of removing barriers. She will be in conversation with our KHA co-host, Professor Kik Helika, who is based at Rhodes University in Makanda, South Africa. So over to you, Pao and Kik.
Thank you.
Good morning, Pao. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Great, thank you. So thank you so much for accepting this invitation to have a discussion about the work that you're involved in relation to dam removals. I'd just like to start off, if you could just tell us a bit about the World Fish Migration Foundation, a bit of a background about it and what your involvement is in that foundation.
Well, World Fish Migration Foundation was born because of the success of the first World Fish Migration Day celebration back in May of 2014. So 10 years ago, we created this International Awareness Day to connect with the public and inform them the critical situation of migratory fish species populations and their huge value for as a food source, economy, jobs, in not only for biodiversity. And the success was so big. We had hundreds of events organized that day. We were not expecting hundreds of events around the world in all the continents, and thousands of organizations who directly work to protect and restore these migratory fish species populations, that we decided we needed to really put all our efforts, and we created World Fish Migration Foundation. Our founder, Herman Vanningen, created the foundation. And while starting with the World Fish Migration Foundation, Herman Vanningen and I thought that it was crucial that we started to investigate and understand the dam removals that were being done in Europe, if any, because we were aware of all the dam removals being done in USA. The USA had a database on all the removals done until 1,200 until 2012, I think, and all the benefits and legislation and even grants, funds to support these works. So we were like, are we doing anything in Europe? Is anything being done? And when we started officially Dam Removal Europe initiative in 2019, that same year, we found out that at least 5 countries had already removed almost 5,000 barriers, and nobody was talking about this. We were in shock. So why were all these barriers being removed? Who were behind these removals? What benefits they were getting from it? So that's how Dam Removal Europe initiative started. And we started to compile all available information and facilitate this information and these benefits to others in other European countries who could benefit from doing so. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I would like to ask you a few questions about the Dam Removal Europe program, but just generally speaking, you can just tell our listeners what it actually generally entails.
So you mean about Dam Removal Europe initiative,
yes,
right?
In Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this initiative entails that first, we tried since 2016. We have tried to find every single professional and expert doing these dam removals. Who was behind this? We started to create the biggest network. And then also to connect with people and finding the people who are interested in this field. And until now, we are 6,000 people in the network. And what we started to do is collecting all this legislation in those countries where there is legislation specific for dam removal. And we started to collect also the knowledge, the know-how, the knowledge on dam removal, the monitoring, the cases were monitored, and all these benefits that they were getting from removing obsolete, useless, or even active dams that were too damaging, right?
Okay.
And what we started doing is sharing this information with everybody that was interested, especially water agencies and ministries of environment. So we have been doing international seminars and national workshops every year. We have been supporting everybody that is interested. For example, the case of Lithuania is one of the best, where the Ministry of Environment was interested to find out why these dam removals, barrier removals were positive, and they wanted to know how. And actually, they wanted to know how to implement this in their legislation. So we support them in the process, and they did actually. In only 3 years, they succeeded and they implemented this in their legislation, and they started to remove dams in their country, in Lithuania. And pretty much we are here, our team is here to share all this knowledge, all these successes, as to support and help anybody, any type of organization who wants also to start removing barriers. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I was fascinated by an article which came out in the journal Nature in 2020, which has a very fascinating title, More Than 1 Million Barriers Fragment Europe's Rivers. And it speaks about the great diversity different types of artificial barriers, from dams to weirs to sluices, etc. And it also speaks about the sheer pervasiveness and the extent to which these barriers exist. And just to quote one quotation where it states that a median distance between adjacent barriers for all countries in Europe, on average, this is the average, every 108 meters, you'll come across a barrier, which is incredible. And I'm just wondering, this diversity of types of barriers and this extensiveness, is there any differences or unevenness across the European landscape? Are dams found, for instance, more extensively in one country than other countries in Europe? Is there any differences in that regard?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're completely correct. I think all of us, even the partners involved in that project, we were 20 partners in the AMBER project. AMBER means Adaptive Management of Barriers in European Rivers. And we were 20 partners from 11 countries. And one of the deliverables, one of the activities that we needed to do is to find out the real number of barriers in Europe. It was completely unknown until 2020. So the only information you could find before 2020 was that Europe has more than 7,000 big barriers. That's all. But that's the peak of the iceberg. And river managers and scientists knew there were many more. The problem is that nobody had really started to compile of this information. So we were 4 years compiling in 36 countries official inventories, okay? Official inventories doesn't mean that they are complete. They could be very incomplete. Some countries have a very incomplete inventories, like Spain, for example. That in that paper you read, you can see that we compiled around 30,000 barriers in Spain, but actually scientists did a correction, made a correction because we did a field validation. We went, all the partners, to the river to validate these official inventories and see if they were accurate. And we saw that not at all. Some countries have a very incomplete inventory. And then Spain, for example, has around 170,000 barriers. And this was completely shocking for all of us. But you are completely right, going to your question. Not all the countries have the same density on barriers. Why? Pretty much because of history. Building barriers really started in the industrial revolution. And in Western Europe has many more barriers that Eastern Europe, for example. That's why we still have in place barriers that have easily 100, 200 years old. And these little barriers, mostly weirs, still also have a huge impact. And actually, the impact is very clear. One of the impacts is crystal clear. This is completely linked with the decline on migratory fish population and the disappearing, completely wiped out of free and local inland fisheries. We Europeans barely don't have that anymore. Yeah.
Okay. Also, thank you for that. In terms of the project of dam removals in Europe, I had the opportunity of looking at the Foundation's latest dam removal progress report for 2023. And it estimated that at least 487 barriers were removed in 15 European countries in 2023. In terms of the information that you have, I mean, is there an increase in the number of barriers which are going down in Europe over the years, or is there no sort of clear trend at all?
Yes, there is a clear trend, and we started investigating and trying to find out the number of barriers removed per year in year 2020. Since year 2020 until last year 2023, these 4 years, the number keeps increasing. And it's not the final number, it's the number that we were able to find. Maybe there is even more, but definitely there is a clear tendency on increase. Some people might find this worrying because, you know, we are, it looks like we are going to remove all barriers. Not at all, not at all. Think about the study you were talking just right a minute ago. In that, in the collection of barriers, the number of barriers collected was 630,000 barriers. But then we went to the field and we saw that actually the number is at least 1,000,000 to 200,000, which means that we have hundreds of thousands of barriers abandoned, obsolete, illegal, not being used, that we need to remove them. So we found out that in these last 25 years, more or less, a minimum of 8,146 barriers have been removed in 27 countries in Europe, okay? So that still number might look like very big, but it's not. We have more than 500,000 barriers that are not in the official inventories. Actually, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, one of the critical questions, I guess, is why remove dams? What is the significance of removing dams? And just to refer back to your 2023 report, so the Foundation's report, it speaks about the need to restore river connectivity and ecological continuity. I also had the opportunity of watching the documentary Dam Busters, which I believe, well, you're quite centrally involved in it. And you interviewed a number, I believe they're referred to maybe as river activists of some sort. I can't remember the phrase actually used, but one of them mentioned the need to liberate rivers, which is quite an interesting concept because it speaks about an understanding of nature, which we treat nature not simply as an object, but as having some sort of subjectivity or some need to recognize that they're not simply to be manipulated by us and used by us, but they have their own living things as well. So what I wanted to find out is, so what are the main advantages, do you believe, ecologically, economically, socially, of removing dams?
So about you referring about river activists, actually, we call them river heroes, I think, but that's what you meant, river heroes. And they actually, if you go and remember all the interviews from the documentary, many of them are even people working on public administrations. They are not really activists. And many others are researchers. Actually, there are only two activists in the documentary. One is Roberto Eppel, which is the person who really started the movement in Europe 30 years ago in the 80s. in late 80s. And another one is Jesus de la Fuente, who has and his community NGO community association, who has been fighting for the removal of a big dam in their village, and which is severely affecting fisheries and seafood industry, and among many other things. So yeah, what you're telling, your question about the benefits, this is a very unknown question, a very known. People cannot understand that when you remove an infrastructure that has taken a lot of effort to build, right? Either for irrigation, for water supply, for hydropower, right? For navigation. How the hell are you going to remove something that has taken so much effort and money to build? Okay, there are many benefits and reasons behind barrier removals, and we can group them in four. First, legislation. In some European countries like Spain or Austria, it is mandatory to remove an infrastructure built inside the river after the dam owner has finished the use of the infrastructure. Why? Okay. Because it's a hazard. A dam or a weir or any infrastructure inside the river, it's not a waterfall. You need maintenance. You need to take care of it. So you cannot just leave infrastructure in the river, right? Especially in public rivers. I mean, rivers are public in Austria and in Spain. In other European countries, rivers are private. So the situation is a bit different. So first is legislation. In some countries, it's mandatory that the dam owner removes and pay for the removal and leave the river as it was. And the latest country to include legislation on this is Lithuania, as I commented before. Another reason is safety. And actually is the most important reason for removals in the USA. Because a dam, as I said before, or a weir, just like a building, you need maintenance. If you just leave and abandon a building, what's gonna happen after decades? It might collapse the building. Sure. And you are putting at risk the safety of the people, right? Exactly the same with an infrastructure inside the river. So if you are not gonna pay for maintenance and have that infrastructure in perfect conditions, you need to take it out, okay? That safety is very important. And actually, but not only because of collapse, just the fact to have a weir, not a dam, a weir in the river, it exacerbates the flooding effects of big storms. And this is something very unknown by the public, because the public think that just because you have a weir, it's going to give you flooding protections benefits. But it's not like that. Only a dam or a large dam designed and managed to protect from flooding has the ability to protect you from flooding. Weirs are not designed, are not used for flooding protection. And actually just the fact that there is a weir in a river in the middle of a city, it automatically increases the water height. So in the moment you have a big storm, it worsens your flooding effects. You know, the water gets out, overflows of the channel faster. So that's why in many cities in Europe, they are removing all weirs that has no purpose, and what it's only doing is putting at risk the citizens. And also there is more safety reasons. There are certain infrastructures, small weirs, that are called commonly known as drowning machines. What does this mean? Sometimes infrastructure weirs that are 1.5 meters, 2, 3 meters, 4 meters high, which are not big, they create below the dam a hydraulic notch, like a washing machine. Yeah. And if an animal or a person, a river user, an angler, a fisherman, a kayaker, a swimmer, anybody that is maybe using the river, tries to cross it, it will get sucked down. Okay. And many people die also below this infrastructure. Actually, USA started an inventory a few years ago, and they have already recorded over 1,000 fatalities due to just having a weir there with this tremendous power of hydraulic power sucking the people to the bottom. And in Europe, Dam Removal Europe started to try to collect if there is any accident of this kind. And we found out only in a year that at least 129 people have died because of this infrastructure that many times are abandoned. And these are people that are river users, that are in tourism, you know, and they are not aware of the hazard. So safety reasons, as I said, super important. But it's also, you also have environmental reasons and economic reasons. Environmental reasons, I think, are the most known reasons. When you put a dam or a weir in a river, is exactly the same as putting a blockage to your veins. So if you put a blockage to your artery, a human will die in a few seconds, right? River basin will take decades, but actually, eventually, it will happen. If you put a blockage to the vein of your little finger, well, you might lose your little finger or even your hand, right? But you will keep functioning. What we have been doing in Europe for more than 2 centuries is putting blockage everywhere. And now after 2 centuries, we are seeing the effects. What are those effects? Completely decline or extinctions of migratory fish populations. Our rivers are not productive. We cannot feed from our rivers. We also have a strong problem in some cases of cyanobacteria algae blooming, because this water that is stored behind the dams, this big amount of water, when we reach high temperatures during summer, and there's a lot of organic material in some of these reservoirs, there is an explosion of cyanobacteria algae, and you cannot even touch the water. You cannot even swim in the water. And with these high rising temperatures in summer more and more, we are having more cases like this. You also have problem with erosion of the channels behind, vertical erosion. Deltas start disappearing. Why? Because they don't have sediment input. So all the sediment starts being stored behind all these barriers, hundreds and hundreds of barriers. So these are some of the impacts. There are many, many impacts. So what happens? This is directly connected with economic reasons.
Okay.
If you start losing all these, what it's called ecosystem services, these free benefits, these free services we get from the river, like good quality water, fisheries, food, lowering temperatures, because if you have a good protected river with running waters, protected with riverine vegetation, you cool down the temperatures, but you don't have that anymore. You have huge reservoirs looking to the sun. Here in Europe, 40 degrees Celsius in summer, the evaporation rates are tremendous. And that's another thing that I didn't comment before. Some people here in Europe think, especially where I'm from, Spain, that just because you have a dam, you have water secured through the summer. But that's wrong. When you store your water in a reservoir, with high temperatures, you are completely using a huge amount of water through evaporation. So between 5 and 20% of water get lost. Okay. If you still have problems and you don't have rains, the reservoir is going to empty. So we have had summers in Spain where municipalities have their dams, but they have empty reservoirs. Where is the safety on water? How would you say in English? Water supply safety. There is you don't just the best way to store and secure you're going to have water through the summer is having healthy and recharged aquifers, because it's like a reservoir underground. It's not affected by the sun. It's well preserved, right? So we need to be aware of this, and we need to really take care that our aquifers are healthy and they recharge properly, which, by the way, dams affect the correct recharge of aquifers. But let's finish the last reason, economic. So when some countries like Sweden, I will just share an example, a real example from Sweden. There is a municipality, Klippan municipality, who a few years ago executed a socioeconomic study of how much, if they would get any benefit, if they would buy 3 active, not abandoned, active hydropower dams, they would pay for the demolition. Would they get any economic benefits after putting so much money? The conclusion of this study was that only 2 years after the removal, after purchasing the dams, the 3 dams, and removing the dams, which is expensive, after 2 years, they will gain, the cost will be balanced with the benefits they would get back by recovering the ecosystem services. And in 20 years, the benefit will be of 75 million euros. How is that possible? Some people ask me, but if you're paying to purchase a dam and you're paying for the removal, what kind of benefits are you going to get? Because you don't have hydropower production. People only think about hydropower and irrigation benefits, but they will be recovering their fisheries. They would be recovering their beaches. Their beaches are disappearing because there is no sand input, and they will recover the beaches. There will be more tourism. They will increase their recreational values and activities in the region. They will increase population in the municipality because rural populations are suffering from inhabitants decline, but they will recover this, and they will start creating new jobs. And some people might think, well, but that's just an estimation, right? They haven't yet removed the dams. They have purchased the dams. And so this is theoretical, right?
Sure.
We know it's not theoretical. In Estonia, this is already happening. 7 years ago, the Ministry of Environment and the Environmental Agency of Estonia removed 7 weirs in the Parnu River, one of the biggest rivers in Estonia. 7 years after, all what I just said, all these benefits are happening in the Parnu, in the Tori municipality, everything. So there are many economic benefits behind dam removals. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that very comprehensive discussion of the advantages. One of the issues, which I know you're fully aware of, just one of the complexities of trying to remove dams or particular dam, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe that you try to focus on the removal of unnecessary or obsolete dams which no longer perform the function for which they were initially built. But the problem that arises, as you're fully aware, is that sometimes a particular artificial barrier has acquired a significance and a function beyond what it was originally designed for. And that because of that, there might be some opposition or resistance by local residents to the removal. It might simply because the dam it may not even have any economic significance, but it might have significance in terms of identity, to landscape, also to different reasons why there might be opposition. It may be because of economic benefits. So how does one try to address that problem? And I know that there have been challenges in Europe in the past, perhaps you could speak about contemporary issues as well, but how does one try to engage with local residents and other stakeholders to try to ensure that this process is done on a consensual basis? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And we suffer from this social opposition daily, especially practitioners who are the ones executing dam removals, not us, right? We pretty much compile on all this information and try to support and help, but we are not there in the field removing the dams. And all these practitioners suffer from this a lot. I could give you hundreds of examples, actually. And the best way to solve and avoid these problems are, before removing the dam, before even thinking about it, is to organize community meetings to give information and answer any fear, any questions, any fear from the community. Sometimes there is maybe not a particular fear, because maybe, as you said, the dam or the weir doesn't have any function anymore. So it's more a sentimental link, right? And that's very difficult, actually, to work, because it's just I should not say it's just, it is a relation, in the family, in the community. They have their dam that has been there for 100 years. They have learned how to swim there. They have been fishing with their parents and grandparents. So that's very difficult. But what I always recommend, and what we always recommend, is very important to set up these community meetings and make people aware that if they keep the dam, what this entails. And people are not aware of that. And I could give you actually several examples. One in Madrid, where the community wanted to keep the dam. It's a big dam. Like I think it's like 16-meter dam. And the dam had no economic value anymore. They no purpose. It was used for nothing anymore. But the community, the municipality wanted to keep it. So they managed to get the ownership. But after that, they found out that it's millionary. You need a lot of money to maintain and keep in safety conditions a dam. They were not aware of that. And now they have to face that they have to pay $500,000 to repair and maintain in good conditions a dam. Imagine a municipality facing that amount of money. That, by the way, even if they had the amount of money, personally, I think it's better to put that money on healthcare, education, or other activities for the community, right? Than just repairing a dam that is not going to give you a clear benefit. It's I don't know, hydropower, water supply, irrigation, whatever. So this is very important. We need to share and inform the public that dams and weirs are not waterfalls. They are not waterfalls. They are civil infrastructures that need maintenance. You don't maintain them, you have the risk of collapse. You have the risk of having other safety issues like exacerbating flooding. And we always need to remind them that, okay, the dam, some people say, but the dam has always been here. No, the dam has been here all your life and all your father's life. But the river here has been millions of years. And the river has not always had that dam and actually functions better without the dam, right? So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to spend the rest of the discussion looking at Africa and dams in Africa. I realize that the foundation has recently initiated a Dam Removal Africa project and had a webinar about this, I believe, in February earlier this year. Could you just tell us briefly about what this project entails? Thank you.
Yeah, my work colleagues actually started a Dam Removal Africa, and because thanks to the network and the colleagues and the contacts we have in Africa, we found out, actually, thanks to our colleagues in Ethiopia, our good colleagues in Ethiopia, that they have seen, researchers from universities in Ethiopia have seen with their own eyes that inland fisheries are declining, and one of the reasons are dams. This infrastructure that impedes the movement of fish and impedes them from going to the feeding sites, to reproduction sites. And this, we are talking a very serious thing, because we're talking about the food source of many communities. I mean, this is not just about energy supply, or irrigation. This is food security. These are big things. So when talking with our Ethiopian colleagues, we thought we should maybe start Dam Removal Africa and give support to those people in Africa that they know, not us, but them know that by removing these barriers, it's going to be beneficial for water quality, for food security, to avoid maybe erosion or flooding problems. So what we aim in this Dam Removal Africa is exactly the same as we have been doing these last 8 years in Europe. First, provide any information that the people want, public administrations, researchers, communities, NGOs, and also try to build a fund. Hopefully build a fund like other funds in USA or Europe. Europe, we have the European Open Rivers program that helps financially and gives grants to help remove these dams. So we want to build something similar in Africa. So when people want to remove a damaging barrier, they can apply for fund and they can do it, and we can give the support, technical support, or any other type of support needed it. So that's why it was the very first webinar. It was the start. We are in the very beginning of the project, but we hope that we can give the help that it's needed in Africa. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I do a lot of work research on South Africa and Zimbabwe, so I try to just see what's happening with dams in terms of possible removals in South Africa and Zimbabwe. I only came across an example of in South Africa small dams being removed in Kruger National Park to allow the 5 rivers in the park to flow properly for reasons that you've given before. But what I tended to come more see is dams going up in Africa, or at least in Zimbabwe, rather than going down. And so I came across a recent article in a newspaper, May the 29th of this year, entitled Zimbabwe Diocese, Catholic Diocese Rebuilds a Damaged Dam in Response to Climate Change and Water Scarcity. To rebuild a dam in order to solidify it to allow for irrigation of crops because of climate change. And there is quite a significant initiative in Zimbabwe by the government to build dams because of climate change. The argument being that that dams will be a source of water for purposes of irrigation, because in Zimbabwe, as in other African countries, we are seeing increasingly certain areas which, for instance, could grow maize 10 years ago, can no longer grow maize. Now are growing rapoko and sorghum and other more drought-resistant crops. So, I mean, how does one address that? That given climate change and perceptions of the need to build dams, how does one try to engage with that type of arguments? Yeah, it's a difficult one, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is, because I mean, honestly, we all know we need dams. It's not that nobody's saying we don't need dams, right? But it's very important to build dams with the knowledge and the technology we have in the 21st century. And my fear is that I see other continents, I mean, outside Europe, building dams as we used to do a century ago, not applying this knowledge and this technology. And I think is a very delicate issue, but thank you for bringing it up, because I really want to comment on this. Dams, and I would like everyone to understand this, dams are necessary, but dams are very damaging, just like X-rays. X-rays, the application on medicine and human X-rays was discovered at the end of last century, at the beginning, sorry, of last century, around I don't know, 1909 or something like that, 1910. And that was revolutionary. And the doctors started to X-ray people with no control for minutes and even hours. But X-rays, they could see where the bone is broken, where is the tumor, where is the bullet stuck, right? Decades after, they realize X-rays are very dangerous for human health. Did we stop using X-rays in hospital in the 21st century? That's what I ask everyone. No, we haven't. But do we X-ray people for 45 minutes like they used to? No, our X-rays now lasts 1 second or less. Does that mean that X-ray is of worse quality because it's only 1 second instead of 45 minutes. No, actually, it's not worse. It's even better quality. How is that possible? How can you have an X-ray that is only 1 second instead of 45 minutes and be better? Because we are applying the technology and the knowledge of the 21st century. Dams is exactly the same. Nobody wants all the dams out, but what we ask, scientific community ask, NGOs ask, that we need to be very careful where to locate these dams and for what reason. It's very damaging to locate a dam in your artery, very much, that put it in a little vein. And we have to be honest and we have to be very well informed of why we really need that dam. And I can tell you, sadly, is not because of climate change. It's not because as I said before, I think in my example before, if I'm telling you that storing water in a huge reservoir or a little reservoir, you are going to be losing up to 20% of your water through evaporation. And it's actually estimated that by 2060, that evaporation loss can even go up to 40% loss. If that water might be exposed to tremendous temperatures, and you might have cyanobacterial problems, so you won't even be able to use the water, or maybe you don't have rain through all the summer, so you cannot even store water.
Sure.
Actually, it's the contrary. We cannot keep building dams with the idea behind that this is going to save us from extreme temperatures and extreme climate conditions. We cannot keep doing things. We cannot keep thinking and acting like in 1940s and 1950s, which is the way we used to think. We need to start storing water out of the river, outside the river, when it's possible. It's not always possible, of course. We will have to keep some big, giant dams, but we need to try to start storing the water outside and protect it from the sun, and maybe even in smaller quantities, like for villages. And also the fact that this is very controversial, what I'm going to say now, but is the truth. We need to really be careful because the dams are being built right now in certain places of the planet is going to affect directly in 20, 30 years in the food security of these communities. And I have seen this with my own eyes, for example, in communities in Bolivia, where dams have been built 15 years ago and 10 years ago in the Amazon, in the Brazilian Amazon. People from Bolivian communities, they don't have fisheries anymore because fish cannot go up to Bolivia. And this is tremendously serious and worrying. So we have to really study, scientists and governments really need to team up and partner with scientists and see, okay, we need energy, but how much? Because we cannot leave these people without a food source in 20 years, without a sustainable and free food source. This is super important to highlight. Local, free, and self-sustainable food source, right? It's these fish that do not come from hatcheries like in Europe. So we need to really rethink and say, do we really need this big dam? Can we maybe build another smaller one in another place that is not going to affect fisheries, is not going to affect water quality for the people? Can we're in the 21st century, can we even maybe get the energy from another source? 100 years ago, we didn't have much options. It's what it was, 100 years ago, but now we have a bunch of options. Can we maybe study the possibility to get the energy from another source, right? So you're completely right. It's very worrying. I'm very worried about these dam buildings because I see that will put at risk as I call it, the free supermarket, the wonderful nature supermarket, of our rivers, as in Europe, it's completely gone. And I think we need to sit down and rethink this. And we need to do this in a more responsible way. Yeah.
Well, on that thoughtful note, I'd like to ask you whether there's any other issue you'd like to raise before I conclude.
I will No, I wouldn't like to raise anything. I would just actually I would like to ask for a call for action. If anybody is listening to us or will listen to us in the future, and you can help, and you know that maybe look in your look go to your local river, look the health of your river. Do you have any infrastructure abandoned that is useless or that the community is not happy about because maybe the community detected that you're starting to have water quality problems or fishery problems? Contact Dam Removal Africa and contact Joshua, who is our key contact here, a colleague, and we are here to help and talk with the community, try to engage your public administrations, and we are here to listen to your case and help as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also encourage our listeners to go to the Foundation's website, the World Fish Migration Foundation website, and also to watch the video, the Dam Breakers video, which I found very fascinating. Pao, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to meeting you sometime in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you much to you, Kirt, and to you, Joshua. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.